everyone, welcome to Writer of the Week. Before we get started, remember to subscribe, and to learn more about being interviewed as Writer of the Week, click the link in the description below the video. Today we're here with Mia Jones, author of The Perfect Wife. Welcome, Mia. How are you today?
I am good, Melissa. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to start off with you reading an excerpt from The Perfect Wife. Can you set the scene for us?
I sure can. This book is about a married couple and a lot of miscommunication and how it can affect the marriage. Grace felt her heartbeat slow and thump painfully against her breastbone as the ringing in her ears continued. "This is Jackson Freeman's phone. Please leave a message after the beep." Grace hit the button before the beep. She had nothing else to say and had already left 4 messages, 2 to his cell phone, 1 to his assistant, and 1 to the office answering machine. Grace looked at her watch for the 3rd time in 10 minutes and then around at the restaurant. Her hands clutched at the snowy white linen napkin in her lap, and a red tint covered her face at the look of pity she received from some of the patrons. She tore her gaze away from the people. The last thing she needed at that moment was to feel shame. She couldn't take dealing with yet another destructive emotion. Her stomach grew progressively tighter as the minutes passed. He was close to an hour late. When did a wife finally give up? Sadness pulled her down into a black hole of depression so deep it almost terrified her. If she let herself go, she was afraid she'd not be able to get back up, and Grace had more than herself to consider. For so long, for so many lonely months, she'd ignored her own feelings and been supportive wife she thought Jackson needed. But when did she say enough? Enough going days without seeing him because he left in the morning before she woke up and came home after she was asleep. They'd gone a few days without even hearing each other's voices, communicating through texts and voicemails. Every month that went by, her depression deepened to the point she'd gone to see a doctor about medicine for her misery. That's when she found out she was pregnant. After the first overwhelming shock, the dark cloud that shrouded her life had lifted. She had something to look forward to, someone to love who would love her back. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but she'd do whatever she needed to. She also had a profound secret hope that a child might make Jackson want to be home more. The sound of laughter across the restaurant brought her back from her daydreaming with a jolt. Grace knew she was partly to blame for the fiasco her marriage had turned into. She'd made it her life's mission doing one thing, taking care of Jackson, her husband of 8 years. They'd been together since their senior year in high school. 15 years they'd been a couple. They planned to start a family in their late 20s. They wanted to be young enough to have more if they chose to. She was now 33, 34 next month. Her hand went to lay softly on her stomach where her first child lay, the one Grace was going to tell her husband about when he showed up for their anniversary dinner.
So that plot line is about how miscommunications can destroy a marriage. Where did you get the inspiration for that?
Probably from my own marriage, for the simple fact that we've been together for 30 years. And so we've had little parts of our marriage where we weren't communicating. And if we hadn't loved each other, I think, enough, I think we would have probably been divorced a couple times. So I think that's kind of, I take a little bit of my books from my own life. I just think in every marriage, they have rocky ups and downs. And I wanted to write a story about that and how you can overcome things and hopefully they work out. Fighting for your marriage, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Can you tell us more about your characters, the main characters, some of their background and how they met, how they interact in the book, and without spoiling the end?
So Jackson and Grace, they met in high school and they hit it off, and they'd been together for years and years. They went to college together, and they finally got married. And since they got married, Jackson had been working so hard and to become successful to take care of his wife, and his wife was there to take care of him. Well, they both got so caught up in their own lives, and they didn't communicate enough, and they didn't talk, and it came to a point where it probably would have broken them up if things hadn't happened. Certain things had to happen. Some kind of trauma happened to make them kind of wake up.
So the communication caused them to drift apart, the lack of communication.
Absolutely, yes.
So a common theme among writers is that writing and reading helped them overcome difficulties in their early lives. Does this apply to you? And can you tell us about your background and how you became a writer?
Oh, sure. I agree with that. I started writing when I was like 13 years old. It actually started with a diary, and it kind of progressed from there. My childhood was not easy. I was in a family with 7 kids, and my father, he didn't really believe in being a part of the family. His job and the way he was raised was he made the money, and that was it. And then you add to that my turbulent relationship with my mother, and I just ended up spending a lot of time alone and with my horses and dog. See, when I was in my 30s, I finally got the courage to go to college, and that really kind of helped my self-esteem a little bit. I ended up with a degree in criminal justice, and I've used that knowledge in a lot of my books. I've also had the fortune, I've been fortunate enough to be able to stay home with my 3 boys, and it was important to me because of my childhood to be there for every part of their lives. And then now they're 27, 25, and 17, and they don't need me as much anymore. And so now I'm kind of living my dream of being an author.
That's amazing. So the criminal justice, do you think that helped you lay out the plot line of your books because, you know, they teach you how to prepare court cases and how to think logically in sequence and so on?
Yes, it did. All of it, yes. It just made me think a little bit different about more strategy instead of like, you know, just putting the words on the paper. And it did. It helped. It helped a lot. And I learned a lot. And the self-confidence had a lot to do with it too.
How much time do you spend pre-preparing a plot line, or do you just let the plot take you where it wants to?
Yeah, it takes me where I want to. I sit down and it just comes to me. I don't have a hard copy. I don't have a character, you know, page like some authors do. I just sit there and it comes to me.
That's incredible. So you are a prolific author and you've written 11 books. Can you introduce us to each one briefly?
Oh, sure. Okay, well, The Perfect Wife we just heard about. And the second one it's called an anthology because it's a bunch of stories put together in one book. And it's called The Breakup or Makeup Anthology. Now, my book in that is called No One But You. And that is about 2 people who are torn apart by someone they trust. The other books I have written are in the romance genre. My third one is First Sight, and that's about Jessica and Garrett. And both of them have learned the hard way not to really trust anybody. They both had really hard childhoods, but they overcame it, and they both became very successful. But when they meet, they have a lot to conquer to get together. They have a lot of fears to overcome for them. Now, Stalked, that's my fourth one. This one is about Kira, and she moves to be closer to her sister and kind of work with her sister. And she gets excited because she meets Daniel, who is a part of her sister's life. In a short amount of time, Kira not only attracts Daniel, but someone who isn't out for love, but more of revenge. And so she has to deal with that kind of stalking situation. The next one is The Courage to Move On. Now, this was the very first book I put out several years ago. And this one is about Lexi. And Lexi has lost everything. She's had a really, really rough time. And the only way to hold her together, she thinks, is to get revenge. Well, one of her husband's past friendships shows up. And thankfully, he's there to prevent her from killing herself. Not suicide, but just by the stuff she's trying to do to get that revenge. And they fall in love, of course, romance. Open Fields, this is about Victoria. She was never able to stay in one place because of her mother, and so what she always dreamed of doing was having roots of her own. Well, she got this opportunity to be on a ranch that her uncle had owned and given to her. She didn't know anything about ranching, and so many things on the ranch had the potential of hurting her. Well, her neighbor, Zane, was fighting his attraction to her, but also at the same time trying to get her from not getting hurt from some of her choices. So the next 3 books are the Chasing series, and it's Chasing Secrets, Chasing Shadows, and Chasing Paths. Now, this series is about 3 women with unusual struggles with relationships, and they each have their own way of resolving it in their own unique way. Number 10 is called Lost in You. Now, this is about Anna, and she comes from a very wealthy family, and she's just never fit in. And so she goes out and tries to find her place in the world, and she ends up in the most unlikely place and finds love. The last one is Never Too Late, and this is about Emily. She's been married, has a couple kids, gotten divorced. Her marriage was abusive towards her, not physical. It was all emotional and mental. So when she finally gets to move on, she lives her dream about living on a ranch and writing, being a writer. Well, the owner of the ranch, Gray, has an interest in her, and she just doesn't trust his feelings for her at all because of the way her husband has made her feel.
So you said that your goal is to entertain your readers, make them laugh, and sometimes cry. Do you plot out these points in your story arc before you start a book, or do they reveal themselves to you at the opportune moments for each emotion?
I do not plot out anything. That all just comes to me for some reason. It's the way my brain works.
I'm actually also really curious about, why do you want to make your readers cry?
I don't want to make them cry as much as feel what these people are going through. Each of my books tends to have funny parts to it, loving parts to it, and sad parts to it. And it always kind of like makes the story real to me, I think.
And can you tell us the name of the book it takes place in, and describe the most poignant, heartbreaking scene you've ever written and how it was resolved?
This is a hard one because each of my books has heartbreaking scenes in it. But if I had to pick one, probably Jessica, maybe because the trust issue hit close to home for me, maybe. But it was resolved because Garrett just didn't give up, and I just love that part. So, yeah.
And nature and animals mean a lot to you. Can you trace the roots of why you feel so connected to them and how they help you write? You did mention earlier that has to do with your childhood.
Yes, it does. They were the living, breathing things that gave me love and acceptance as a child. I didn't really have a lot of that with the humans in my life, and animals are just always good for that. And they still do. I still have animals surround me, and I just love it.
Are there a lot of animals in your books?
Horses and some dogs, yes. Yeah.
Are you one of those writers who can write a predetermined amount each day, or does it have to be as inspiration strikes?
Inspiration strikes. I would love to be able to say I'm going to do 10,000 words a day, but it just kind of depends on my head at that day. And then I have a problem with, I'll be writing and then get stuck on one book. And so I'll kind of like put it off to the side and then pick up another one that I've already started maybe and write on that for a while. So I could be working on 3 different books at the same time, which is kind of confusing for me, but it seems to work.
Yeah, I was going to ask, do you ever get the plot lines mixed up?
Not so much the plot lines as the people and their
characters,
names.
Right.
Yes.
And when you're not writing, what do you enjoy doing?
Oh my gosh. This is kind of an easy one because I love being with my family. I love being with my husband and my 3 children, and we spend a lot of time together. I also have 5 sisters, and we spend some time, not as much as we'd like, but together, the 6 of us, is kind of crazy. And I usually end up with a stomach ache because I am laughing so hard. And yeah, I love being with them too. And I need to be outside. I need to be with my animals. I'm more at peace on a horse than I am anywhere. I just need my animals and family, and I'm happy.
Do you have horses?
I do not anymore. We did, but we do not anymore. We just didn't have time for them. And so, but my sister-in-law has some. So I do get to see them and ride.
That's nice.
Yes.
And what projects are you working on? Any upcoming publications you'd like to tell us about?
Well, I've just finished 2 anthologies with R&R Publishing. And those are supposed to be out this year, I think. And then I've got 2 other stories, other anthologies with R&R that I need to finish. And those should be out next year in maybe 2021. I just finished the 2nd book of my Mail Order Bride series, and that was Lost in You was the #1. I forgot to mention that. The 2nd one is called Breaking Free, and that is at a beta reader where they're going to go through and see if I should change anything. It comes back to me. I do revisions, and then I send it to an editor. So hopefully, if it all goes well, that will be out this year or early next year.
What is the plot line for Mail Order Bride? Is that set in the olden days, or is it modern, or?
Modern. It's all modern, and each of them are different. It's not so much okay, like Lost in You. It was her sister that was the mail order bride, and she got pulled into it, and that's kind of a funny way to how that happened. The 2nd book coming out is Breaking Free, and hopefully that, if all goes well, will be out either later this year or next year. I've got so many other projects in the works right now. I'm working all the time, so I'm putting. Oh, go ahead.
I'm just very interested in the Mail Order Bride, how that works logistically. Where are the brides coming from?
With Lost in You, the sister did it as a joke, and somehow Anna got pulled into it, and she ended up with the guy. The 2nd one is Breaking Free, and this is an actual mail order bride, which actually does happen nowadays. It happens. It's a rancher that's very, very secluded. He doesn't have time to meet and greet women, and so he finds a woman online, and that seems to work out pretty good too. And the 3rd one, there will be a 3rd one. I haven't quite grasped what's going to happen on that one, though.
And now it's time for Tweet of the Week, where we do a deep dive into your tweets and select one for you to tell us more about. You recently retweeted, what is the first book you ever fell in love with? How would you answer that question for yourself? And is there a connection between the first book you've ever loved and what you write now?
All right. Yes. I will never forget the first book I read. It was called Where the Red Fern Grows. It was not a romance. I don't know how I got into a romance genre, but that's where I've been pulled. But it is a very sad story, and it affects me today thinking about it. And this was 30 years ago. That was the book that got the passion in me going for actually reading and not so much writing. And then the writing kind of came after that. But Where the Red Fern Grows, it's a very, very good book, and it pulls you right in.
What is it about?
It's about dogs, about a family with dogs, and things happen, and these two of the dogs die, and for some reason a red fern grows between them, and it's really, really tear-jerking.
Wow.
It's very, very good, but it talks about the family, and it's fiction, but it's very good fiction.
So Mia's books are available on Amazon, and you can find the link in the description below the video, as well as a link to her website, edgeofromance.com. Thank you so much for being with us. It's been a pleasure talking with you, and I wish you a lot of ongoing success with your books.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. I had fun.